Hi, Brian.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to call the Citizens Oversight Committee meeting to order. First of all, we have the April 21st minutes. Do I have a motion to approve or any amendments?
I move approval.
And a second?
I'll second.
I think, Russ, I just want to point out, Mike Arnold had requested one change to his comments in
Okay.
his letter. I don't know if we can make that change.
You know, how do you look at both of them?
He wanted one word struck from his, the word financial struck from his comments, which we can do.
Okay, then.
I apologize in making the motion. I assumed that Letitia was going to make Mr. Arnold.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that
Go
clear.
ahead and make that change, and with that change, in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have any buddy on the line who would like to make a comment? And please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Oh, you're muted.
To make public comment in Zoom, there's a raise hand button that you'll click, and if you click raise hand, we will call you in the order you queue up.
Okay.
So at this time, it looks like no one has raised their hand, Chair Colombo.
Good. And we'll move on to to item number 4, which is discuss the future Citizens Oversight Committee. Steve's not here today. That's surprising because Steve was doing a lot of the work on this. Did you expect him here, or did he make any comments?
Yeah, I actually hadn't heard from him. I just kind of assumed he would join us.
All Steve's.
Maybe he'll join a few minutes late.
Yeah, I don't know if it's, but in a couple minutes, he's had trouble with mechanics sometimes. So I think he was intending to attend the meeting, and it may be late, as you say, Aaron.
Okay, well,
Or if somebody could call him offline or something. I don't know. You know.
Yeah, I'll shoot him an email just to.
Yeah, thanks. Because I've emailed with him in the last 24 hours, so I know he's.
Okay. So there's been lots of conversation about what our role and the role of Citizens Oversight Committee should be. I know people have been giving their comments to Steve. Does anybody want to make a comment about what they think the role of this committee should be going forward at this point? Dennis?
Mr. Chair, at the last meeting, we had this discussion, and I think it was referred, my suggestion that the board that makes the decision what we are, because again, the measure outlines the role of this committee, and it is just for input and review of the strategic plan every 5 years.
Right.
Obviously, the name of the committee is one that deems that the committee has more power and more oversight powers, and we don't. And so, therefore, my suggestion was that the board needs to decide what the role is of this committee and to expand it, or else keep it the same and clarify exactly what we do, and that the title of the committee is not really what it does.
I couldn't agree more with what Dennis said. I think that's just exactly right. Is that it's up to the board, and we can state our willingness and to participate, and we know the importance of the citizens' oversight, but it's up to the board, I think, and people need to recognize that. So.
I think we could make some recommendations based on the feedback that we've received and the discussions that we've had as a committee. And I'm glad to see Steve Rabinowitz is here with us, because I actually was intrigued by his comments at the last meeting about looking at the open space district and their advisory and oversight committee structure. And I did have a chance to go kind of read through those descriptions. I haven't participated in any of those committees or been to their meetings, but just reading the descriptions sounded like at least one option that we could explore a bit and maybe make some recommendations to the board in terms of the need for more community input on some of the service questions that are facing SMART, and then stronger, if we feel that a stronger oversight role is needed, then that could be a recommendation that we make. Or if we feel that the structure, the responsibilities that we've had have made sense. But I think it would be helpful to the board, I would think, for us to make some kind of recommendation. And I agree that they need to make the final decision on any changes.
If anybody wants to know about that advisory committee, I've served on it over 15 years, so I can answer any questions.
Well, my only comment is that I agree with Dennis. This should go. The board should be telling us what we need, what our role is. And I think the big problem we have right now is that people look at the Citizens Oversight Committee and think we're supposed to be doing a lot more, and saying we're not doing our job because we haven't done this, or this. And I just think it was pretty narrow in terms of the definition for coming out of the legislation. And I think that I think it would serve everybody's interest for the board to be very clear about the role, and then we can stay within the boundaries of that. Because otherwise, I don't know how we continue forward, because we continue to get comments from a variety of people that we should do this, or this. Well, yeah, we do what this role is intended to do only, and we don't have the authority, frankly, to do beyond that. So anyway, I think he needs to. I wish Steve was here. He could kind of summarize what the comments people were giving back to him.
I got an email from Steve that he can't seem to get in, so I'm gonna try to help him get in.
Okay.
I had trouble getting in on a mobile phone and iPad. It asked for a meeting ID, and none of the numbers actually seemed to work. But I'm back on my computer.
Yeah.
I
You
apologize.
have to use
for my-
that link. If you don't use the link that was sent out, you're toast. That was my experience from that's why I was late last time. I was on the meeting, but I did it the normal Zoom approach, and that doesn't work. You have to use the final link that was provided, or else you're dead. And so, but once you use the link and follow instructions, it really actually works really well. So, good.
I can follow the links, but I can't change the island background that my wife put on the computer. So as long as I can.
I'm loving it.
I apologize for that. It's better than the Golden Gate Bridge, I guess. But
I like the background.
So I'd like to make the comment for Aaron and Letty. I sent from Zoom an invite to Mr. Brittlebaugh, as well as over to you, Aaron, if you'd like to forward it, or Letty can forward it as well. So if they click the link, they should be able to get in.
I think Julia has joined us. We can't see you, Julia, but we see.
I'm here.
There you are.
Nice background.
That's a background. Okay. All right, but for those of you who just joined, we were talking about the role of the Citizens Oversight Committee and the need for definition from the board. And I think that's pretty important. Should we wait to move on till Steve gets on? We just hold for here.
I did have a question though, because wasn't it mentioned at the last meeting that we would potentially become the eyes and ears of the district in terms of the public? Am I incorrect in that? Because I do have a question about whether we can fulfill that function.
Yeah, I think that's one of the questions that Steve had asked on his memo that he sent that was in our packet as a question. Should the role of the COC include serving as SMART's eyes and ears? Assuring that information about SMART is reasonably accessible and assisting in the development of a future funding measure. And then he goes on to ask questions about the membership, because I think that was another point that came up in some of the discussion.
if I could add to that, there's no question that SMART needs to have input, but to me, it's what is the right vehicle to do that? And this is a committee with a name that sounds like, and it can be added and we can evolve into that. I just think it's far more powerful for SMART just to address it directly and say, we want input. This is what this committee is doing. Instead of trying to morph something, why don't you just deal with it and get public input in the best way, which is perhaps another committee that has different roles. I don't know. That's my view anyway. So
I agree.
Okay. Well, I think we need to talk to the board and have the board. In my opinion, we just need them to tell us what they want out of this role, out of this this committee. And if it's more than we're doing now, that's fine, but that's not what we've been designated as. And I think that, I know there's been lots of comments about we don't do enough, we don't have any authority. And frankly, we kind of don't, because that's the way it was set up with the legislation. And, we reviewed the strategic plan, and we took our comments to the board, and they could do with them what they want. They didn't have to do anything. I mean, they could say, thank you very much for your input. We're going to do it the way we want to do it. So I think there needs to be better, clearer definition of what they want, if it's something different than we've had historically, because I think there certainly is a misunderstanding in the public about what our responsibilities are. And you get comments from Mike Arnold or whoever or anyone in the community, and it may be that they think we should do something, but we really don't have the authority to do that. So I just want to make sure that it's clear what our role is, and then we can execute on that. And I think that's the important thing at this point. And
do we think it's the board of directors that needs to give us input on what we are, or is it also the public? Because I do feel like the public has a very different understanding of what the Citizens Oversight Committee is. I think they see it as exactly that, the Citizens Oversight Committee. Now, and we know that we're really not a Citizens Oversight Committee. We're not really overseeing much. So is it the board and also the public that makes that decision on what our role would be?
Well, I think when the legislation was passed, it was defined what it was, and our role was to review and the strategic plan. And I'm not sure what went beyond that. And I think the board, the reason it would be good if it came from the board, because they could define it maybe in a broader way, and then we would have clear marching orders about what we do and how we do that, and we make it clear to the public. I think you're right, Julia. The public has a very different understanding when they hear Citizens Oversight Committee. How come you haven't been overseeing SMART? How come you haven't made changes on this, or this? I think that's a problem, because we don't have the authority to do that, frankly.
Well, it's the board's responsibility. That's
right.
Not our responsibility.
That's exactly right.
That's what they're there for.
That's right. So, we can give
I just want to point out that Steve, I think, is on the line now through the phone. Steve, is that you?
Hey.
Yes, I'm here, and they unmuted me, so I can talk. I think the measure that passed, Measure Q, simply referred to us as a Citizens Oversight Committee and didn't define in any way what we could or couldn't do. And I think it is in the hands of the board to clarify whether we're going to simply act in the financial arena, or whether we are to give other recommendations or review other issues.
Well, maybe Russ, you can take public comment, and then you guys can kind of make a decision about whether you want to send any sort of unified kind of comments to the board or not.
Are there questions from the public right now?
Well, we have 6 people calling in, so you could just see if anybody's. Brian, can you once again give the instruction?
So for the attendees of the meeting, we're opening for public comment now. And in your Zoom application, you will see a raise hand button. Click raise hand to indicate your intention to give public comment, and we will call on you in the order that you raise your hands. So go ahead and click it now if you'd like to speak.
No.
So we have one person up for public comment, John Reed.
Go ahead, John. I think you're muted, John.
Okay, I'm now unmuted. Yeah, thank you for taking my public comment. And I think this discussion is extremely pertinent, and especially in regards to the public's interpretation of what public oversight may be. I definitely think that the public needs to have a venue to give input onto the smart to the smart board, and whether that's at the smart board level or not. You know, on boards that I sit on, the board takes comments from the public, but the boards often have a public oversight committee also, which is another additional venue for the public to influence things that the board is grappling with the decisions of. And I think it's very important for this committee to have more influence than just oversight of the budget. I mean, it's a very limited role, and I think that the public really expects more and deserves more just in terms of oversight. So thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments?
Yeah, we have one, Patricia Tuttle Brown.
Morning, Patricia.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
It's very broken up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Got a bad connection there.
Yes, normal service. Can you hear me?
Nope.
Unfortunately,
Can you hear me now?
unfortunately, your audio
Service.
sounds like you have a poor internet connection. I'd recommend that you try dialing into the meeting with your phone. Might get a better connection that way.
Good idea. Yeah.
Okay. I'll talk later.
Okay.
Cool.
Any other comments?
At this time, we show no more hands raised for public comment.
All right. Well, why don't we, at this point, let's, unless other members of the committee want to have any other comments, let's move to the fiscal year 2021 budget update and survey results. Aaron.
I do have a comment, Russ.
Yes.
Steve again.
Steve, yes.
Public comment at board meetings is a very stilted situation because of Brown Act requirements. When comments are made in general, the board is not supposed to respond to those comments and not to move any discussion forward. Those are simply noted. They go into the minutes and they show up the next month. Usually they're forgotten. So there is no back and forth between board members and members of the public. On the advisory committees that I've served on, if a member of the public shows up for one of those meetings, there is much more give and take. And when the member of the public makes a suggestion, then other members of the advisory committee can point out that either that suggestion has been worked on and it's what stage it's in the process, or there are reasons why that suggestion doesn't work. Then the member of the public can elaborate, and there can be some development of the idea. And I think that's exactly what we need to have for people, for instance, who are complaining that trains go by and there's nobody in them, and they sit at the crossing and you know, maybe they see 2 or 3 passengers. Because trains are dead-ending, unfortunately, that happens. But people need to have the back and forth that describes the situation in a way so that they come away with some sense that they've really been heard, and that that if they have something reasonable to contribute, it's going to get worked on. I think that's a role we could play.
Okay.
If I could,
Dennis?
I want to agree with Steve. And Steve, I think you raised a point I hadn't thought about, which is that in addition to SMART actually establishing something, whether it's the COC or another committee, that it's going to listen to on a regular basis from the public, it would be really advisable to have less than a quorum, but some SMART board members, executive or whatever, as part of that. And that's part of the listening process. It's not receiving a report, but with some SMART board members involved in such a committee, the public's going to get listened to a lot more, I think. Anyway, I think that's a great idea. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think that if we had a, you know, and again, that we can make recommendations to the board as to what they want the role to be. But I think if we gave them advice that, you know, this should be although it's open to the public, they can make their comments. If one of the functions is to obtain comments from the public and then make recommendations back to the board in terms of those comments or the suggestions, great. I feel a little uncomfortable that we really are kind of we're moving forward without really any definition about the role, and that's what's frustrating here, because I think everybody has a different idea what an oversight committee should be, and it sounds like a lot. It sounds like that there should be, you know, a strong role with the board and with the organization, when in fact I don't think that's the case. It hasn't been, and it's fine if that's what it should be, but we need that defined by the board. And I think my mind, until that happens, we're going to kind of flail away at this until we get definition. But you know, that's just my thought. I don't know if anybody wants to commit.
Well, to me, I'm looking at the ballot measure. It says the Citizens Oversight Committee will be established by the SMARTS Board to provide input and review on the strategic plan and subsequent updates. Mm-hmm. The committee will be composed of citizens from the SMART district appointed by the board.
Right.
That's pretty specific. I
think.
It
is very specific. But I think people want to do more, or what they think it should be more, right?
Yeah.
That's the issue.
Well, the title of the committee, it defines that we are doing more. It sounds like we're doing an oversight, and we aren't. And it's exactly what Steve just said, is that, hey, the definition was very defined, very focused. It was strictly a review and input into a strategic plan. That was it. And so to expand it, the board needs to go ahead and give us the authority and the roles, the responsibility to do that, or else some other committee that's going to do that.
Right.
And also then a community, some kind of an outreach to the community and to the ridership to see where this should go and what we should do to take input. As Steve likes to say, is the eyes and ears of the community.
That's up to the board to decide that they want that function.
Yep, right. Correct.
Great. Okay. Any other comments?
So Russ, this is Tanya. So I'm just wondering if we feel like the minutes of this meeting and from this meeting, the last meeting, and the letters that have been submitted from COC members like Steve B are sufficient to provide the board an understanding of kind of the feedback we've heard in our discussion, or if we feel, and I think this might have been in the meeting agenda, or maybe in Steve's message, that we need to somehow summarize, you know, whether it's a memo, or Russ, maybe it's you going to the next smart board and just summarizing the conversation that we've had, and at least providing that information to the board so they have a better understanding of the comments that we've heard from the public, the discussion that we've heard, and maybe not a recommendation from us, but just a request that we need to have the role clarified and the name of the committee at least examined to see if it still makes sense.
I think that's a good idea. I don't know, Erin, did you have any comment on that?
No, I mean, I do think it would be useful to have some communication back to the board, basically saying that you've discussed it at 2 meetings. And I mean, I am happy to assist with that, but maybe it's just, I'm just thinking out loud, you know, a letter from you, Russ, as the chair, just transmitting the minutes of the meeting and the comments that have been received from all of the members, and that can be transmitted to the board. And then the board chair, Eric, can decide, how he wants to agendize that, because he has appointed a committee to look at a bunch of different issues. And so maybe whenever he wants to agendize that, then he can include that as part of the agenda, and then we can make sure that you guys know when it's on the agenda, and then Steve wants to come, or whoever wants to come can in person provide that feedback. That's just an idea.
I'm happy to just pick up the phone and call Eric and say, how should we do this? Because he's the chair, and I think that would probably streamline this whole thing. It's
sure, yeah, that's certainly a good way to go.
And get his recommendation, and he said, and I think it should be an agenda item, and if he can do that, and then we can, as a committee, go to the board and say, okay, this is what we're doing now. What do you want us to do? And we've gotten all these comments from the public. People think our role is different than it is. We want to make sure it's very clear as to what we do and what our, if we have any authority at all, then what that is. I think that would be really helpful to go directly to the board, and I'll start with Eric and go from there. I think that's probably the simplest, easiest way to do that, unless somebody has a different thought. Steve? Looks like you do.
Yeah, this is Steve again. I think one thing we need to be clear about is that if we take on more duties, we're going to need to spend more time, and we need to have a little conversation about how much time and energy do members of the Oversight Committee have. Are we willing to meet regularly every other month, perhaps? Are we willing to have a subcommittee that might meet in the months when the full committee isn't meeting? We don't want to offer something that we're not willing to deliver on.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that depending upon what the scope is, it may be different people in the room, right? Mm-hmm. Because if it's more than people want to do, then they can certainly step off the committee, and if it meets their needs, great. But I think that's part of it. You define the role, and then you reach out to the people and say, who wants to do this? If we don't want to do it, if we don't have anybody to do it, then that's a different answer. But I think we don't want to make the scope too broad, because I think then you want to make sure that you have something that people can actually achieve. And I don't want to get trying to find this as such a broad function that people say, well, that sounds like way too much work, and I don't want to be there every month or less or more. That's a big commitment. And so I want to make sure that we have something that we can commit to and actually do, and people show. So I don't know. Any other thoughts?
Well, I agree. And I think once the role of the committee is defined, then the board, I would also recommend that the membership be looked at, and the board consider implementing maybe terms for the members, and a process for appointing new members, because we've all been, I think it's great that we've all been involved for so long, but I think it's important for committees to have some turnover and some process for that. So I think once the role is clear, then yes, it would be advertised. There'd be a process for applying for the committee, and then being appointed and knowing that you have a term. I think that might also help with concerns about the workload of being on the committee.
When did the legislation get passed? What year? 2009?
2008, sales tax.
Yeah, it was when in the committee, yes.
So some of us have been on this committee since the beginning,
most of you.
Oh, most of us. So, I don't know how many people want to continue with that for much longer after 12 years. So anyway, I think once we have definition, then people can make decisions. And I think, Tanya, that's a great idea. And we can, frankly, at that point, reach out to the community and trying to find people that would be good to serve on the committee. I think that's a good suggestion.
So Russ, you'll be willing to talk to them to kind of streamline this?
Yes, I think that's the best way to do it. I will give Eric a call and just start it right there, because he's a good guy and he'll help streamline the process, I think.
Great.
Okay. Everybody okay with that?
Good.
Okay. All right. If nothing else, then we can, I think we can move to the next item on the agenda, which is fiscal year 2021 budget update. There's nothing's changed in the budget, is there? Nothing's changed in the market. I'm sorry.
When we last met, our goal was that I would have the budget done by now. Normally, we would have presented a preliminary budget at the second May meeting to the board. But, you know, this is not a normal year. So let me just, you know, we've included lots of backup in your board packet that you can look through at your leisure, but I'll just streamline it by walking you through where we are with the process. We are, first of all, let me just fill you in on what we know right now, which is that, you know, our trains are still running a minimal service. Our ridership is very low. Our fare revenue has dropped. You know, we were getting 90,000 a week, and it's much lower now. You know, so just all the numbers that we know have dropped. We do not have sales tax data yet, because the first time we will get really useful data will really be after the budget is passed, because of the lag in when merchants collect the tax and when they submit the reports to the state, and then it takes a while to get to us. So it's sort of uncharted water still for us. What I've been doing is, you know, giving the board estimates of what this could mean, and basically just looking at, you know, what sales are happening, what sales aren't happening. Connecting with all of my colleagues in the North Bay who are also trying to figure out this question. There are 2 or 3 different estimates out there, different firms making estimates. So we've been scrambling and collecting data and redoing the numbers, and we will be by Friday finalizing the budget and presenting it next Wednesday at the first June meeting for the board. And leading up to that, what we've done is we've had several meetings with the board to outline some strategies for cuts in the meantime, until we know how far and how deep we need to cut. So the board has given the okay to include in the budget that they'll be reviewing next week 3 different, what we're calling buckets of reductions. The first one is just one-time savings that we know we can achieve, and that list was a $3.5 million list of things like fuel savings. We're just eliminating purchases of equipment and things that we, you know, thought would be useful to have, but we can live without, like a trailer up at our operations facility. We're swapping out some equipment that we were going to use Measure Q for with other equipment that we were getting grant funding for. So there's a bunch of different swaps in and out of things that we've presented to them, and those are all going to be included in the budget. We've also included a $2.6 million list of mostly contracts that we're going to try to live without. So it's things like we pay Golden Gate for customer service, and we're going to bring that in-house, and that was a big dollar amount. We are going to eliminate the North County bus service, as well as the Larkspur bus service. Larkspur, for obvious reason. North County, the ridership is so low that Sonoma County actually had recommended to us to eliminate it because they didn't think it was cost effective. The other, and we also are hoping to do a smaller refinancing, which we talked about at our last meeting. The one reduction that the board had a lot of concern about was turning off the Wi-Fi on the trains. For us, it's a $500,000 savings. It's not something, again, none of these are things we want to do. We're just trying to identify cuts that we think we can make that will not devastate, our riders and the service we're trying to provide. So we presented those two options, as well as kind of a pretty reduced service option of 515, which is 5, 10, 11, 22 daily trips, as opposed to the 38 that we're running now. So it would have been a severe reduction. So we presented all of those to the board, and they requested that we do some outreach, and before they made any decisions or gave any guidance. And so we ran a community survey for a week. Our public outreach team did a great job of putting together a survey and sending it out to every channel we had. I know we had a lot of communication with all of our partners at all of the different agencies, chambers of commerces. The list is pretty long, and it's included on our website, and a summary of it is in the PowerPoint that you received. In the end, we had over 3,200 respondents, which is a great response. And if you flip through that PowerPoint, it tells you that about 74% of the people who responded do have ridden SMART. So it was really good taking the temperature of people who write us. And what we found, just flipping through to kind of give you the highlights, is that 29% primarily rode on weekdays, and 18% rode on weekends. And then 28% of those who responded said that if we, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that we were talking about cutting weekend service as well, which would have saved us $1.5 million. So there was 28% of the people were very concerned about that. The other feedback that we got was that the service schedule that we originally posted, the 22 trips a day, did not have an early or late enough run in it for people who need to get to work really early, both people commuting north as well as people commuting south. And then the same for the afternoon. So there was a lot of suggestions around that schedule would not work for me. And so we presented all of that feedback to the board at our last meeting. And we also presented to them our thoughts about how to move forward with the budget at this point, what we should do, given that we don't really know the long-term impact and the sales tax. So we presented to them an option of adding one more service at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. And we posted that potential schedule as part of the presentation, and you can see that it is, I think, the last page of the PowerPoint that we sent to you. It just shows what that schedule would look like. It's called the 616 weekday schedule because it's 6 runs in the morning, 1 in the midday, and 6 in the afternoon, basically. And so the first run leaves Sonoma County Airport at 5:02, and the last run of the day ends at 8:17. So it is a reduced schedule from what we were running before the shelter in place, and it would save about $1 million over what our operating costs are right now, primarily in operations staff. There are some other non-salary savings. So we presented all of that to the board and got feedback from them that they're very reluctant to, the other thing that the survey showed was that Wi-Fi was 90% really didn't have strong feelings about the Wi-Fi. So if we eliminated it, it didn't seem to be a huge issue for people, for the majority of people. And so when we talked to the board about that, they basically gave us direction to go ahead and prepare the budget with all of the cuts that we discussed, and to assume if and when we do resume regular service, that for now we're only assuming the 6 ones, this new schedule, as well as perhaps the weekends. And then our plan is to put all of that in the budget, present it to the board next week. And then what we'll do over the 6 months after that is sort of monitor and review it. And the reason we're able to do that is because we have these CARES Act funds that are providing a huge infusion of cash for us. We have over $10 million received. We hope to get another $6 million hopefully soon, once MTC finishes its allocation process. So those funds, that $16 million, gives us some breathing room to not completely, not have to make decisions in a vacuum, basically, is what it does. So that's kind of where we are. It's a very fluid situation. There are a lot of questions we still don't know the answer to. What we will do in the budget, and once it's complete, we'll of course send that to you. In the budget, we'll walk through kind of how we believe we're going to close the fiscal year 20, what all of our reserves and fund balances will be, and then how we see all of that playing out in 2021, assuming we get the CARES Act money, assuming we do make these cuts that we've identified, and then the board can decide to approve that. They'll take input at the first meeting, and then they won't vote till the second meeting. So there'll be some time for the public to give input on that. And then it's our expectation that it's kind of going to be a year-round budget process. We will, once we start getting full quarterly data, we'll reevaluate whether our estimates and our projections for sales tax and other revenue were correct, and go from there. If we have to mid-year reopen the budget and make additional changes, we'll do that. And it'll just be one of those years. And I'm sure most of you are on other boards. I think you'll be seeing this happening. Well, maybe not so much at like an SCTA because they're not operating anything, but for sure the counties, the cities, everybody is going to be having to look at their budget again and again and see where they are. I think everybody is in the same boat. This is just kind of where we are. So let me stop there and see if you have any questions.
Anybody have questions?
My question is, we got a long memo from Mike Arnold about how this is all being done. What is your view of the questions that he's raised in that memo, Erin?
Well, I think the budget process, a lot of his questions are part of what the budget process is, which is we present the information that we know as part of the budget, and so that will be in there. And I think, I don't have too many other comments other than it's, in government, this is what we do. We make assumptions, we approve a budget, and then we keep an eye on things and we see how we go. We don't prepare short-term budget, we prepare a fiscal year budget, and that will all be part of what we're presenting next week. So a lot of the questions that he asked will be part of the budget document.
Yes.
If Steve is finished, I want to kind of follow up on that just very briefly, because, well, I would rather commend staff. I think that this budget presentation is excellent, given so much uncertainty with all this, having 3 or 4 scenarios, and then as you have to be flexible and deal with it as you go along. But with regard to the Arnold memo, I read it carefully, and it seemed to me that the central point of this is because of all of this, corona and virus and failure of Measure I and sales tax disappearing, he is saying that staff should be required to do endless amounts of scenarios to satisfy all of the endless possibilities that could happen. And, you know, besides that being useless, waste of time, you know, I looked at it, I think if somebody wanted to really hurt smart, they'd have their staff going down rabbit holes on $65 million things or issues that are changing every day. So anyway, I don't want to get too emotional about it, but I really want to commend staff because I think we're getting the right information. And the fact that some people want more, you know, that's not, I think that you're doing a great job. So thank you.
Whenever you get a chance.
Yes, Dennis.
And it's really clarification. First of all, I like your approach and how you're doing this, that you don't have the answers and you have to see, and as information develops over the next month, 2 months, 3 months, you got to be flexible in doing that. So I really do like your approach out of doing that. And really, I'm sure you have done all these analysis and everything else. Is that how much information do you want to feed us, and can you feed us in a short period of time that we do get together? And so it's really clarification I'm going to ask for right now. And I'm trying to really understand a little bit about the mixture of the trains, the reduction of the trains. So back in your prior financial, it said that we're reducing 38 trains down to 22 trains, or on a 515, however you want to do that. There's a savings of $4.7 million. And now we're talking about, well, based on the survey, we're going to increase that from the 515 to the 616, which I think is a good idea. But the savings is 1.1 million. And so I'm still trying to figure out, is it possible, or do you have something that could help us, people, that what's fixed cost, what's variable cost, what's the cost of running that additional train, so that people can understand that? And if they could relate that variable cost of running one additional train to potential revenue by run, that would give a lot of clarification to a lot of things that's going to go on. The other benefit that you have, good, bad, or ugly, is that you actually know what your costs are as to reduction of weekend service, because since you're not doing that. I don't know if that means that there's still a lot of fixed costs that you still have on the weekends, i.e. maintenance, you know, security, all those other things that are there no matter if you're running a train that day or not. So that kind of information would be good just to get it out, not only to people like myself, but also to the public, so that we can understand the answers that you already have, but we just don't know those. Then last but not least is the Wi-Fi. I was just going through the contract list, and I don't see the contract summary that you always provide every month with those financial statements. And I don't see Sonic on there. I just was curious about if it's a contract, how that works. Because you're, in one of the comments, you mentioned that you would need to cancel the contract with Sonic. And so those are just a few of the little things that I saw, you know, crunching numbers and looking at analyzing, trying to figure out what's going on. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dennis.
So Dennis, on the runs, it's Farhad did at one of our earlier meetings, which I can make sure you guys have. He kind of he didn't walk it through from a number perspective, but he tried to do a good job of explaining that even if you run, you know, one train, you need
I have that one. Yeah, I have his.
Yeah, that one, but it doesn't have numbers attached to it. So I'll circle up with him and see if there's anything further. It's very complicated because what you have is the schedule has to, it's all these interactive pieces. Like in order to hire staff, you need to, you know, in order for them to uproot their families and come work for SMART, you know, they need a full-time job. So you need to provide a schedule for them that provides them, you know, that 8-hour day, and then they can't work more than 12 hours right under FRA rules. So every time you want to add a train, you're balancing your need for staffing with your availability of trains, your availability of track, and it becomes kind of this this block of you can't just cut one train, because you cut one train, you're really cutting 4 trains throughout the day, because that same staff person that's running train number 1 is then also turning around and running train number 4 and number 8. And so that's the challenge of it's, you know, it's not like a bus service where you can say, let's just cut the last run of the day and that guy gets laid off. You know, it really becomes this challenge of a giant puzzle trying to figure that out. So that's just a little bit of overview of what goes into that. And then if you cut the weekend service, you're not only cutting train conductors, but you're also ending up cutting things like signal people, because you don't need to be responsive and you don't need to do as many inspections. You don't need to do there are all these FRA rules that require staff to do certain things if you run a train. So there's just fewer staff involved if you cut weekend service, and that's still an option the board could choose. But at the moment, we're sort of holding that in our back pocket of things we could do if we decide we need to make more cuts. So for now, it's just sort of being, and it's also this general feeling that we have this core ridership that loves us, but then there's all these occasional riders that that do pay for SMART and want SMART to be there. And that ridership was really growing right before COVID hit. We were really seeing a huge jump in our weekend ridership. So we hate to lose that, but we'll just have to wait and see. And then finally on the Wi-Fi, just to clarify, we have 2 different Wi-Fi situations. One is on our platforms. We do have Sonic providing free Wi-Fi. But on the train, it's a different contract. There's a combination of costs. There's a contract with a firm. I can't remember the name right now. I think it's
the GBS Group.
Yes, right. Thanks, Brian. And then all of the cell contracts that we have to have, because it's a cellular service. So that is the contract that would be eliminated. It's not Sonic. Sonic provides Wi-Fi for free at the stations, and that will still continue. So when people are waiting for the train, they will still have Wi-Fi, but for the 20 to 40 minutes they're on the train, then there would not be Wi-Fi. Although I will say, when I ride the train, I don't even use the Wi-Fi. I use cell service, and it seems to be pretty good. But it's definitely not something we want to do. It's just something we feel like we're trying to identify as many people, and that's one of them.
It's Aaron, just a comment about the weekend service, and I think that there's the costs involved, but there's and I think you kind of touched on it, the goodwill and the trying to build support for SMART. A lot of those people that support the train are ones that use it on the weekends that can leisurely go to whatever, some place in Sonoma County or someplace in Marin, and take their families and things like that. And I think the elimination of that is more than just cost. It's really support for the organization and for the train. And I think that's what would be a very, like you say, you have it in the back pocket, and hopefully it stays there, because it's I think it's important in the overall long-term success of the train to be there. So
my point was really that we actually have the actual cost that has not to do with my desire. I really truly believe that the lifeblood of this train is that it's going to change from a commuter to all around board of transportation. That I see it on weekends, I see it later in evenings, I see it expanding, and I think it's changed since the initiative initially passed. I think since 2008 to today, that the commuter pattern, especially after what we're going through right now, is going to completely change. And I think that weekend service, later service, is going to be an integral part of this success of the train or not. So that's where I think it's going to. I think it needs to expand.
If I might add, I think before we cut the weekend service totally, we should think about it in terms of what you both just said, because I think it is a source of future ridership. I'm looking at the schedule though with the 616, and I noticed you in the morning and afternoon, the headway is around half an hour to 40 minutes for about 2 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the afternoon. There are like 5 trains. And I'm just wondering about, I understand the desire to add an earlier train and a later train, but I'm wondering about whether we need all those trains in terms of ridership that are in both of the morning and afternoon. What is a ridership of a typical train at 7 in the morning or at 3:57 in the afternoon? I mean, does it make sense to have all of those trains 30 to 40 minute headway?
I do think we tried to look at the ridership for each run and preserve the highest ridership runs. That was the goal. And then what you find in rider behavior is that you know, the frequency tends to drive ridership. Even if someone's not riding a certain train, they like knowing that it's there in case they need to, you know, if they have to leave early, it's there. If they, you know, need to leave later, it's there. So and it is, like I said, once you run, you know, hire a crew to run one train, they run 3 trains, right? So some of it is you have those costs of building a schedule around trying to provide frequent service with the staff that you have. So short answer is, yeah, we tried to target ridership. You know, there's less ridership in the midday than there is. That first train in the day is packed. Those first couple trains and those last couple trains, they're pretty full, or they were before COVID. So the interesting thing will be seeing when everything reopens, seeing what that looks like, right? I mean, the whole world seems to have changed, so we'll have to see what happens when we reopen. Whether, you know, we did see as part of the survey, if you look through it, there's a significant number of people who are saying they either have lost their job, or they're worried about losing their job, or they're just they're gonna continue to work from home. So there'll be that unknown dynamic that we'll have to manage.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Aaron?
I appreciate your description of the complexity of doing all this, Aaron. It's down in the weeds, but it's important for us to recognize.
Thanks. So Russ, you might want to take public comment.
Is there a comment?
Yeah, we have one person with their hand up. Mike Arnold.
Hello, Mike. Mike, yeah, you're muted. You're muted, Mike.
I applaud the use of Zoom. I just have a couple of comments beyond what's in the memo. First, I'd be very interested to understand, based on the prior conversation, how does a discussion of the budget square with what you guys claim is your responsibility, which is focused on the strategic plan and not the budget? But I applaud the conversation about the budget. I'm just interested in what your views are on that. And secondly, the memo did not describe an endless number of scenarios. What the memo was an attempt to do was to describe the enormous amounts of uncertainty facing this agency, as all transit agencies are facing uncertainty associated with a variety of factors, one of which is sales tax revenues, another one is ridership. And to the extent that that's true, one of the questions that you guys are not addressing is the when question, which is they're proposing a budget of adding additional trains, potentially considering additional weekend service. One of the questions I have is, when? Are they thinking of starting weekend service in July? Are they thinking of going to 22 trains or 26 trains per week in July? Because the optics of that, as you all well know, I mean, it's going to be a while before people return to public transit service. I mean, just ask yourself. We're all in a similar age cohort group. And my wife and I can't imagine we'll be on a plane or a train or a bus or anything, a ferry, probably at least through the rest of this calendar year until the evidence is, treatment occurs, a vaccine evolves. And one of the questions that are coming out of this conversation is, okay, I think it's reasonable questions regarding what's the level of service that the agency wants to provide. But I think an important question is, okay, when would they start it? And what are the financial consequences of, saying, well, the doctors are predicting a resurgence. We're already seeing a rise. There's a story in the Chronicle today about the rise in Alameda County. I think it's a relevant consideration to provide guidance to the board saying, okay, these factors are relevant, but are you actually thinking of starting weekend service in July, or are you talking about starting it next January? I don't, from the information and discussion, I don't know what the answers to that question is. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mike. Just one comment, and I'll let Aaron address it. But I personally, I don't think, as you said, Mike, nobody knows when we're going to get back to planes and trains and that kind of thing, and buses. And I think that the board has to be flexible in that respect because we don't know. There's no clear evidence of a date out there that, okay, everything's better. And so I think the board is trying to do the best they can in terms of just addressing the potential of these services as the economy opens up again. And this is a very it's a very difficult question for the board, for SMART in general, just to how to actually operate this train in this time when we don't even know what tomorrow brings. The second point I would make also is that you said we don't review the budget. Well, the budget is really a reflection of the strategic plan, what SMART is trying to accomplish. And clearly this group, that's what our role is. And the budget is way different now than it was 6 months ago. And so I think that's appropriate for this group to be looking at the budget and to understand where the organization has to go to kind of make ends meet here. And I think that's, while that may not technically be our role to review the budget, it is our role to review the strategic plan, and the budgets feed into the strategic plan, in my opinion. So I think it's totally appropriate that we look at it and give our input to the board. But I'll go back to Aaron so you can address the questions maybe that I didn't.
Yeah, I basically agree with your comments. Nobody knows. I would say from a transit planning perspective, we are in constant communication with our transit partners. And one of the things that drives when we start weekend services, when the ferries are going to start operating again on the weekends, right? So that, we have found that connection to the ferry was just really important to the people who are riding on the weekends. And so we'll be making decisions as the situation changes. We don't know. I can't go to the board and say we will start weekend service on this date because, as you said, Russ, who knows? We'll have to see how it goes. And the board at some point will have to make the decision of, how long do you continue to keep staff in the long run. And I will say that for now, one of the big considerations for our wait and see approach is that it takes up to a year to get an engineer conductor recruited, background checked, relocated, hired, trained, and good at their job, here at SMART. So we don't want to unnecessarily lay people off, knowing that it takes that long. If 6 months from now things start to rebound, we can't just restart service if we don't have the staff. So given that the federal CARES Act money was given to us with the very, very explicit instruction that they want us to put that money towards keeping staff and maintaining transit service, that's what we're using that money for in the meantime. We're using it to keep our staff that we will need if we do restart service. And there'll be a point in time, you know, in 6 months, we'll reevaluate and we'll see where we are and we'll have those discussions. And if by then we haven't, if nothing has reopened, then the board will have to a different decision to make. I assume the board will have to look at it and see where we are. But what we can't do is tell you what that is today. We just don't know. It would be nice to know. It would make my job a lot easier.
It would be nice to know for a lot of people, that's for sure.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
Does anybody else have a comment?
Mr. Arnold has raised his hand again for further comment. Chair Colombo, would you like me to?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mute, yes. Thanks for the opportunity. Okay, look, the reality is a budget has to be presented, and in that budget is an assumption, whether you like it or not, regarding the cost of providing 616 trains or whatever assumptions are being made. And there's nothing simple about this, Aaron. I agree. The level of uncertainty in the near-term future is significant. And so one of the questions is, when providing the budget, does this committee think it's important to say, okay, we don't really expect to start this service, say, at best guess, until following a resurgence, okay, in which case whatever expenses are being assumed in the budget aren't really going to occur maybe until January, and recognizing there's enormous uncertainty, but in terms of what's being communicated to the public, what's being repeated in the media regarding cuts in service, I've been reading it going, well, wait a minute, we don't have weekend service. They're only operating 16 trains a day. And an element of this is to say, what is the best guess regarding how long they're going to continue this service, and what are the budgetary implications of that assumption? And I don't see that in any information that's being presented so far, and that's the essence of that comment. Thanks, Russ.
Thank you, Mike. Aaron, any other comments? No? Okay.
Well, I'll make one comment. Aaron, thank you and staff for not making guesses for us. I appreciate you laying out 3 or 4 reasonable possibilities and then being flexible, and you're paying attention to the right factors. I don't think anybody can criticize that. And if somebody wants more detail, it's changing every day. I think you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thanks, David. And, you know, it's I try to compare this to other situations that we're going through right now, which is everything is so difficult. And you know, you pick up the newspaper every day, and every day you talk about Major League Baseball is going to start this day, and then it's like a month later, and then it's going to start, and then, oh, we're not going to have the season. We're going to have a season. And football, we're going to have September. They have the whole schedule, which is great, but who knows if that's actually going to start. Everybody is in a situation now where we really have to be pretty flexible. And I think, Aaron, you've done a good job in laying out, you know, the costs and the potential cuts that we can make to get through this time period. But nobody knows when we're going to start again. I mean, you can guess, and you can put a budget in place. Oh, we're going to start September 1st. Well, that's just guesswork. I don't know what that accomplishes, because it's just saying, we're gonna. I don't know. I didn't read yesterday that we're gonna have a vaccine by September 1st. I don't think we are. So until we do that, until we have treatments, I just don't know that we can really make very, I would say, educated guesses about what the needs are. So you know, I appreciate your comments, Mike, but I also think that it's really difficult right now to pick a date and say this is what we're going to do that date. I would challenge anyone that says they could, because I don't think that's realistic. But that's just me. Any other comments?
At this time, there's no other hands raised for public comment.
Okay, great. Is that it for budget and survey?
Yeah, that's it for, and that's it for the agenda. So maybe Russ, what we can do is expect that you're going to communicate with the chair on the COC role, and maybe you can just communicate back to everybody, with an email summarizing your conversation. And maybe what we do kind of tentatively is think about a kind of a check-in with this committee in a couple of months. Honestly, by I would say what would be the purview of this committee as it's defined right now today is we could do a check-in on the strategic plan, which basically to talk about the where the sales tax is and what we know in the fall, August, September timeframe, we would know more. Pending what you learn from the chair, maybe the chair says, oh, we're going to have a meeting this day, and maybe we need a meeting sooner than that. But for me, that's when I would kind of know more and be able to report back to you on whether we see what we see happening with the sales tax, that kind of thing. So it's up to you guys, though.
Okay. Well, I will commit to get a hold of Eric Lucan this week if he's available, and I'll tell him what we've talked about, and I will report back to the committee on his comments, and we'll go from there, if that's okay. And then we'll try and schedule. I think we can be maybe a little flexible on the date for now, and then schedule something in a couple of months. I think we'll probably have a better. Hopefully, we'll have a better understanding of where we are in the whole cycle, and when we think we can get out of it. I just don't. That's the tough part about this for everyone. We don't see the end. We don't know when the end is. If we knew it, if you knew the end, you could plan to that date, and then you could make all the changes you need to make to get to that point. But nobody knows what that point is, and so that's why this all becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult for every business to plan, and this one in particular, because it's so dependent on people being able to get into large groups again, and that's not coming tomorrow. So anyway, but thank you for all your great work, Aaron. It's you've done terrific work on this, so we very much appreciate it. Any other comments from anyone before we move to close the meeting? No? So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second. Okay.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Take
Appreciate it.
care. Stay
Thank you.
cool.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.